This is the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, where we talk with martial arts practitioners about their histories and the influence their practice of martial arts has on their lives. You are listening to the free version of this podcast, which is abbreviated. Help support this program by considering to subscribe to us on Patreon and access the full-length version of the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcasts, all for the price of one coffee shop coffee per month. Go to www.patreon.com/malmag. That's www.patreon.com/malmag. In this episode, I sit down with Kurt Cornwell, who is the owner and head instructor of MKG Detroit. I got a chance to sit down with Kurt after he did a TED Talk in 2019 at UCLA. We discuss a lot about his interesting history and his practice of martial arts. Sit back and enjoy. Okay, welcome to the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. And one sort of interesting thing about the martial arts world in which I live is, and probably for a lot of people, is you end up with these connections through social media, and you kind of meet people through your well-trusted friends. And my guest today is someone like that, someone I knew was a cool person by default early on, Mr. Kurt Cornwell of Detroit, our Detroit, Minnesota Collie Group. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And what we kind of discuss on the podcast is about martial arts and your lifestyle and how martial arts fits into your life and how it makes it better and anything else that leads to. So are you a professional martial arts teacher? Is that what you do for a living?
I am, yes. Yeah, for the last, since I moved back from Minneapolis to Detroit was about 5 years ago. So I had some part-time gigs when I first moved back, but it's the better part of 5 years I've been running full-time.
Oh, wow. So you're originally from Detroit?
Yes. Yeah, okay. I grew up there, spent about a decade in Minneapolis. I moved there to train with Sifu Rick Fei, and then moved back to bring MKG kind of out into the community there.
Wow. Did you do any other kind of work before? I mean, did you have like a career that you were doing?
No, not really. I mean, a career of bouncing around from odd jobs to odd jobs, right? And I met Guru Rick in my mid-20s, so I had just moved I lived in Brooklyn, New York, and was a musician there for a while, which, I would say basically means I was a bartender, right? Which I was. Mm-hmm. I was a DJ and stuff. And so I was doing that, but I didn't really have any... I think false beliefs that I would make it as a musician, right? I just kind of wanted to, almost a bucket list thing maybe, right? I just always wanted to try that, and I had friends out there. I needed a place to lay my hat, and a friend of mine out there had a room open up in his apartment, so I thought, okay, I'll move out that way for a little bit. And then I fell in love all over again with martial art while I was there, and through some different experiences, and kind of never looked back, really.
Cool. Well, I guess, we should just chronologically start at the beginning. When did you get involved in martial arts?
Like a lot of us, I started when I was a kid. My father was a competitive judo guy in college, and so he started to show me some judo things just at home while I was growing up. I did a little bit of karate and taekwondo here and there, but not very consistent. I was a really timid kid. And a lot of the karate schools by me were very traditional, very no-nonsense, kind of barking at you, military drill instructor style thing, which is great. But at 7 years old, this sort of thing, it was kind of put me back on my heels a lot. And it really wasn't until high school where I worked up the courage to jump into something full-time. So I started Aikido when I was, I think, 15 years old. Did that for a few years, and capoeira as well, which was great, especially when I had more youthful back and hips, and I didn't have any chronic injuries yet.
Now that is an interesting combination, and it's funny because we're just audio, but Kurt's a big guy. He's a pretty good sized gentleman like myself. I'm about 6'4", 265 pounds, and you don't look like a small guy compared to me. So when you say Aikido and capoeira, that's not like my first two guesses. Judo, I'm like, judo, that makes sense, right?
Right. Well, when I was in high school, I was very small. I was very skinny, right? I was 6 foot, but I was 138 pounds.
Yeah, like a broomstick. Kind of I was about 6'4" and 175.
Yeah,
so those are lollipop men.
Yeah, Right. So it worked well, and both of those things, not coincidentally, you can trace those back because I was born in 1982. Right. So if you look at 80s and 90s martial art movies, so you've got like somebody like a Steven Seagal and all those films that came out at that time, and Only the Strong and those movies that came out. So I was really, really invested in martial art pop culture as a kid. And a lot of the heroism that comes from those underdog stories, those are the things that resonated with me as a kind of a sensitive kid, right? Timid kid. And so I think that's probably the reason I gravitated towards those without much sense of whether or not they'd be quote unquote good for me, for my body type, but because those are the ones I was watching every day or every night on TV, you know.
Absolutely makes sense. I'm about say a decade ahead of you. I was born in '69, but of course, you know, the things when I was a kid getting impressed by martial arts in the media, Kung Fu the show, Black Belt Jones, Jim Kelly, karate, Bruce Lee, of course, that sort of thing. And then, of course, as you know, Chuck Norris. And so, of course, that's when karate, judo, Kung Fu, these things were.
My dad was really
ninjutsu was popular for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we didn't have any ninjutsu by me, and I'm sure I would have been the first one through the door.
Oh, yeah. We didn't really have it, but it didn't stop me and my buddy from buying a suit and running around the woods.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did a lot of that. And my dad was really into Kung Fu. He loved that series. And by the time I was coming up, that like kind of reboot thing they did, The Legend Continues, where he has a son. And so that was on primetime, I would assume, at that time. So I was really into that as well. My father was really, he was a pretty influential guy, very influential actually, in my youth. And so we would have what we would call like Fooisms, which were just little nuggets that we would take from the show and repeat back and forth to each other. And so even that mindset was always something I was engaged with, right? I just needed to find the right place. And that really is why I moved to Minneapolis eventually, because it just really struck a chord with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were searching, and then how did you find... I mean, this podcast is pretty open. I'm sure there's going to be a big chunk of the audience that knows who Guru Rick Fay is, and there's going to be a chunk that are into other martial arts and don't know exactly who he is. So maybe I'll have you describe how you decided to... or how you found him, how you decided to have that take you to Minneapolis, which on the map is not that far from Detroit, but you know, if you're talking about being away from home, it's a good
good far
distance.
Enough if you're uprooting yourself just for that, right? And
Certainly.
So Rick is one of the few senior full instructors under Guru Nisano, and
you know, he goes back. He's listed in the Jeet Kune Do book that Guru Dan wrote.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if you know that.
No.
But yeah, if you look in the back, there's sort of a
I just picked
family
this up.
tree.
I'll have to look. Okay.
Yeah, in the very back, there's a family tree, and it talks about the different people, and you'll see, you know, the names you'd suspect in there, the Ted Longs and Daniel Lees and all this, you know, with the family tree tracing back up. But then you have sort of the pages of people that are authorized to teach and stuff, and you got, you know, your Larry Hartzell and Rick Fay.
Okay, I
is
know
in
what
there.
you're talking
and
about.
I'm like, wow. And I, you know, my understanding too, Rick is probably the what I'd call prototype of the seminar method of Guru Dan's.
Right. Yeah, and you know, even here during this trip, while I'm in town training with you guys here at Guru's Academy, when he talks of Rick, there's a certain, I don't know, I want to say, I'm not trying to speak for him, that he's proud of him, but he really holds him in high regard. And I think Rick acts as a kind of proof of that seminar method if you're willing to put in the flight time.
Correct, yes.
Right?
Yeah,
because those weren't just guys that went to the seminar once in a while. I mean, he was like a Grateful Dead head, right? He was following him all over the place. Yeah. And then he and Greg Nelson and Eric Paulson and some of these very well-known personalities were then getting together in his garage or in his small schools that he eventually had and just really getting after it, right?
Well, sure. And you're starting to hit on the other thing, too. It's like you could start listing who came from Rick Fay, and you've got this long list of who's who of all kinds of different things.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable when you really walk that back and look at, you know, especially in the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
You know, two of my first instructors who are some of the first people that told me about Rick are David and Linda Hatch in Detroit. And so I met them probably 2002, something like that, and trained with them for a little while. And they're part of the MKG organization, which is Rick's organization, of which I'm a part. And they really held him in that high regard. And David Hatch will talk about, he spoke with Guru Asano early on of like, just follow that guy, like pointing to Rick, gesturing towards him, just follow him. Like he's got the flow down. He understands how this works. And so a lot of us have kind of followed in those steps. So I first got exposed to this at a place called Tracker School. You know Tracker School?
Of course. Well, I know Christopher Harley, so I know,
Yes,
I
right,
know,
of
I know,
course.
I know
Yeah,
what a
yes,
Tracker
yes.
School is.
So, perfect. So I started going to Tracker School. I've been a few times. It was September 2001. And I did what they call the standard course, which is the introductory week-long immersion program. And Tracker School is Tom Brown Jr.'s survival program. It's like indigenous skills and all these, tracking and matchless fires, everything that comes with that. And so I went there. I was maybe 19, something like this, 20 years old. And I spent the week there, really, really, really fell in love with it. It was also something I kind of grew up around a little bit. My dad was really into outdoor and native skills. And so first chance I had, I jumped at it. Well, I went back about 2-3 weeks after my course because I found out they were holding something called the Scout Protector class, which was kind of a mix of what they call scout skills or things like perimeter security, personal protection, but in particular relative to survival, and then martial art as well. And I thought, man, those are like my two favorite things. This is crazy. Why did I should have just hung out there for a couple weeks and waited for this.
Funny thing is, I think I know a couple of names that are going to come up here. I'm just
Yeah,
I'm
right.
going to put it in my
Yeah, I'm
head.
sure that you are.
I wish you could see. I would like write the card down here and,
Right.
and put it down
One
here.
of
And
them
it's
is
going to sound like
downstairs.
either Tim is a magician or Kurt's a magician.
One of them is downstairs
That's
teaching
right.
class right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went back, and this course was taught by a group of people. Chris Farley was one of them, and very quickly became like a big brother to me. Cody Welchin, she was there, and then Georgia Vanessa Larson, right? And so they were kind of running the show, and then along with Paul Bonner from Sarnia in I think Ontario. And Paul and I became rather close as well. He became kind of an email pen pal mentor to me or something like this at the time.
I love pen pal. This is old fashioned. I love it. Old school.
And, so all of these people kept talking. I actually didn't know anything about what the art was going to be. I just knew it was going to be a combination of wilderness survival and martial art. Like, sign me up, right? I didn't have any context for what the skills would be, but I was there. Yeah. And I was just enthralled with everything they taught me. I remember Heaven 6 being like, okay, there's nothing else like this. The JKD trapping immediately sparked something in my brain that's never gone away and still kind of remains at the forefront of what I love. And so all of those people, in particular, George and Harley, their instruction really resonated with me. And they kept talking about two people, Guru Dan and Guru Rick. And I finally put together, they're talking about Dan and Asano, the guy from these movies that I've seen in all the magazines that I was obsessed with as a kid. And that's that person that they keep referencing. So, okay, I'm aware that he's a big deal, right? And this is me at a rather young age, not knowing the scope of really who he was. And then, so who is this Rick person that they're talking about? He must be a big deal as well. And then I came back to Michigan after the end of that amazing experience and started immediately training with David and Linda Hatch because they happen to be in my area teaching all the same arts. And now they're talking about Dan and Rick, these same people, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, boy, so I'm starting to get aware of who Guru Asano is. Obviously bigger deal than I even thought, not just a guy from a movie or whatever.
Right.
But this Rick person really must be a big deal. So,
well, you figure, and I mean the list of people that Kurt's talking about, I know many of them, and these are some phenomenal people. And so imagine taking these people that you think are super phenomenal people, wonderful people, and they're starting to say, they're pointing up the ladder at someone.
Right.
And it would absolutely make you curious. I mean,
yeah, they're doing things and demonstrating things that, you almost didn't think it was possible or whatever. You know what I mean? It really, so much of it just felt like magic. And, I always think Heaven 6 tends to be the thing that grabs people, right? When it's like their first Kali class or something, they see that and they're like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that.
You know? It's kind of like moving a Rubik's Cube real quick. You're like, oh my God,
yes,
okay.
yeah, exactly it, right. The puzzle of it. And so, I was really fascinated by it, and I had my ex, who I was with at the time, lived in Minneapolis, and she happened to live about a 7-minute drive from Rick-faced school from the Minnesota College.
Ooh, serendipity.
Yeah, so that really built an immediate and obvious bridge for me to go out there. And so even when that relationship ended, I stayed for a very long time because I had immediately kind of fallen into this MKG family and only moved back because I wanted to spread that back into the community that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's one thing too. It's interesting. I've actually, and this probably sounds odd with who I am and all the mutual people we know. I've actually never met Rick.
Oh, okay.
I've never had the opportunity to, but I feel like I know the guy.
Yeah.
But,
There's a lot of like too. So,
oh yeah. And there's a lot of magic. It's the only way I can describe it in the MKG family. So he's got something going on, and the people that are involved in that, no matter. And it's amazing how it's branched out. I mean, there's a lot of branches of this.
Right.
And I've not met a soul from any branch that I didn't think was just a spectacular human.
Oh, cool.
Just a wonderful person who, speaks highly of him and has been a wonderful martial artist, but just a good person too.
That's great. Yeah,
so there's something going on there that's just really
well, it's Rick.
amazing.
I mean, because I went there still dreaming of using my chi to stop a clock from across the room or something. You know what I mean? Like
come on.
all of that kind
That's
of
not real?
Yeah, right.
Damn
all
it.
of that kind of stuff, and I still want it to be real. By the way,
Only a ninja can stop a ninja.
Keep one toe in the pond where it's
right.
real. But he did such a good job of keeping my feet on the ground and showing me like, look, this kind of magic within the art is possible with your feet on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't actually require magic. That kind of hocus pocus. What it is hard work and determination and a willingness to play while you're training, while you're immersing yourself in this, and that dichotomy or that balance or whatever between play and violence, right? For want of a better word, really threw me for a loop. And it took me a long time. I don't think that I was probably a real pain to having. I probably still am a real pain to having class, but I'm sure for a while I really was. And he really had to hit me over the head with it. But he has a certain way of just dropping like truth bombs in the room and walking away and letting it sit there and letting the message do the work, not the personality. And that became, I think, for a lot of us a big takeaway, because it's very easy to get your ego engaged in this stuff, and to have a person that is held in such high regard like Rick constantly remove himself from the equation and only put the art on a pedestal or Guru Dan on a pedestal, that kind of thing. Then you start to go, okay, yeah, then who am I if I think I'm pretty special because I got to do this also, right? Like, that doesn't make sense. So you start to really respect and appreciate the opportunity that you have. And so, and by extension of that, now here we are having this conversation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it reminds me of the questions I get sometimes from folks that come in from out of town. They're like, oh, you're probably used to it. I'm like, no.
Right.
I'm not used to where I'm at and doing what I do. I'm
Right.
not at all. I'm appreciative every day of what I'm surrounded with. But yeah, I'm not used to it. I don't know.
Are there a lot of people at the Inosanto Academy that are just neighborhood people looking to do some martial art?
Yes,
stumble through the door.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they know what this is now, but some came in just that way.
Yeah.
Like, Michael Dubin came in because he liked the sound of the drums.
Okay.
Yeah.
Funny.
And I mean, he had some idea, but he really liked the. And then Tanya, who you saw in class earlier, her and her husband Greg, who was in class earlier, were just looking for a nice neighborhood place to take their son for Little Dragons, and they're like, "Oh, this looks like fun too." And now here they are. Yeah. So it is kind of fascinating.
I used to love to kind of play the card a little bit in Minneapolis because Rick's school is in a really nice neighborhood, and there's a lot of people that will come through that just want. Minneapolis is a very fit community, very active, and though it's frozen half the year, people really stay active there. And so there's a lot of people that will kind of come and go just because it feels like a neighborhood spot, and it is in that way. But I'd have a lot of conversations with new folks about, oh, where are you from? How long have you been here? And I'd always point out, like, oh, I moved here to do this, right? It's their first week here. Yeah. They live a few blocks away, and now they're training with some dude who moved halfway across the country just to be in the same class as them. Right, yeah. You see their jaw drop, like, wait a minute. All these pictures on the wall are a big deal, aren't they? Yeah, they are. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of history.
Pretty cool, yeah.
So we got you there. You're training. You understand. It's a big deal. You're doing what you like. So now, what's our process from your training? You move along. You say, okay, now I need to take this back to Detroit.
Yeah, so I think some part of me maybe always wanted to teach martial art, to make it part of my lifestyle and to engage and interact with it as much as possible, and to maybe try to build a profession out of it, but just to share it. And I noticed early on too, if I only learned one or two things, I would then be hanging out with buddies and show them those one or two things because I thought they were cool. Mm-hmm. And I noticed right away, every time I tried to teach, for want of a better word, a friend of mine, something that I learned it that much better, right? By trying to echo it somehow. And so that really resonated and stuck with me over the years. Like, okay, there's got to be something to this teaching thing. And then seeing the community, we always consider like a family that Rick had built with MKG, and knowing the state that Detroit is in as a city, as a greater metro area, as an overarching community, I thought, all right, it seems like this was, 2010 maybe. Detroit was really starting to develop what people were calling a renaissance. I thought this could be a great time to try to integrate.
And this concludes the abbreviated version of the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe here to the YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program by going to patreon.com/malmag and subscribing for access to the full-length podcasts. Again, that is www.patreon.com/malmag. Thank you for listening to the Kurt Cornwell episode. Coming up next week, an extraordinary martial artist from Seattle who is also an expert in Indian clubs. That is James Neidlinger. We'll see you next week. This show is produced by Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine. Visit us at martialartslifestylemagazine.com. Music by Jackal Relic. Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine and the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast are trademarked and copyrighted by TNT LLC.